Then I can actually get work done. Okay, so again, we're learning about homologous structures. Now, homologous structures mean that structures that are the same in this species of animal or this species of plant, and it's also the same in this species of animal or this species of plant, or they're similar. So have you guys ever seen a bat wing? Have you all ever seen a bat wing?
No.
Okay. So a bat wing, here, let me show you real quick. I was going to show you this anyway. Oops. Oh my gosh, why can't I do this? Okay. So this is a bat wing right here. And this is a picture from an image that you're about to see here in just a minute. But a bat wing looks a lot like a human arm and hand. This is a human right next to it, only the fingers are much longer. I mean, the bones are thinner because bats are smaller, but the fingers are much longer. Like if you made all these fingers shorter, then it would look a lot just like a small human arm, okay? So all of these arms here, these are what we call homologous structures. Some are more similar than others, but the ones that are more similar indicate that we are more closely related. Because remember what we were talking about yesterday, how we all have DNA and all DNA is made up of the same 4 things, and that indicates that we all came from the same place. Like a long time ago, we all came from the same place. Whatever place that was, we came from the same place, okay? So the more closely or the more similar these homologous structures are between our bodies and the bodies of other animals like the cat, the more closely related we are typically, okay? So if we look at these are the arm bones. This is called the humerus. The humerus is the arm bone between the shoulder and the elbow. These are humeruses from gorillas, pongos, pandas, which are just chimpanzees, and other types of apes. It says, which statement is best supported by the observable structures? So just by looking at how, you can see how they're very similar to each other, right? Not exactly the same, but super similar. The same parts in the same places, just slightly different shapes. So what does that tell you? Does that tell you that these primates lived in similar environments? Now you may know in the back of your mind that these primates lived in similar environments. Like you may know that, but that's not what they're asking. Based on only what's in this picture, just on the similarities of this arm bone, can you tell just by looking at the picture that they live in similar environments? You can't tell that just by looking at the picture of their arm bone. What about primates sharing a common ancestor? If you have a common ancestor, aren't you more similar to those things that you share an ancestor with?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're similar to your brothers and sisters because you share the same parents. Mm-hmm. You're similar to your cousins, kind of, but not as much as your brothers and sisters, right? Like you're going to look more like your brother and sister than you would your cousins. Why? Because you're related, but a little bit further back. And the further back you go, the less similar you appear. Well, the same is true for homologous structures. The more closely they match, the more closely related you are. So these 4 things, while they're not the same, are very closely related. And they do share a common ancestor. Okay. Now, just to prove it to you, C and D aren't correct because the primates interbreed with similar organisms in a population. You can't, that doesn't make a difference in, that's not why their arm bones look the same. Of course they interbreed with similar organisms because they interbreed with their own kind, right? But that's everything. Everything does that. The primates had diets that consisted of similar types of foods. You also can't tell that either just by looking at this picture. Okay? That's not why your arm bone is the way that it is. So it is B. The primates shared a common ancestor, yes. So that's really the big idea for today, is that all these homologous structures indicate common ancestry. Or in other words, we descended from the same grandparents or great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents, okay? And the closer they are to ours, the more closely our ancestry is. So which statement provides the best evidence that Natans, don't worry about the genus name, is the ancestor of a very unfortunate species name, Isis? That's the species name. So Natans and Isis, why can we, what is the best evidence that this is the grandchild of this up here? What is the same? What similarities do you see between the top one and the bottom one? What body parts look similar in the top one and the bottom one? The head looks very similar. Yep. What else? Or the lower part, like in the back, or the lower part down here? This whole part? Yep. So just the whole shape of their body is very similar. The way that their arms are and their hands are very similar. But what's different? Let's look at something that's different. What's different between the top one and the bottom one? Does one have something that the other doesn't? Look at the back part of the top one. Yeah, the tail. I mean, this has a tail, but it's really more like it's just part of the body now. And look at the back legs. Does this one have back legs? No, it doesn't. It actually does, but you see where they're at? They're very tiny. Did you know that snakes have the same thing? That snakes have tiny little leg bones where legs used to be, but they don't have them anymore. But they still have the bones, they're just extremely tiny. This is what we call a vestigial structure. So vestigial is something that you have that you used to need, but you don't need anymore. But you still have it. It's still hanging around. It hasn't completely disappeared yet. So they have these vestigial legs that used to be big like this, but now they're much smaller. And if you look at the bones of the legs, they're very similar to these. They're just tiny. So what's the best evidence? Is it that homologous structures occur in each fossil? Is it that they have similar nitrogen bases, the GCATs, found in the DNA of each fossil? Is it that the fossils were found in different locations? Or is it that the youngest fossil is larger than the older fossils? Like, what's the best evidence to suggest that these two are related? Just by looking at this picture. They're homologous structures. What? You think it's A? A is correct. Yep. So the homologous, that's what we're looking at in this picture.
The only one that describes it like being similar, besides B.
Right. Now, B also says similar nitrogen bases are found in the DNA of each fossil. And that's probably true. They probably do have similar DNA, but you can't tell that from the picture. So that's why it's not B. The fossils were found in different locations. We don't know where they were found. We don't know if they were found in different locations, so it's not C. And the youngest fossil is larger than the older fossils. Even if it was, that that doesn't necessarily mean that has nothing to do with them being related, just because it's smaller or larger. Okay. Which of these resources did the scientists most likely rely on to form their hypothesis? What hypothesis? We got to go back and read. In 2010, scientists excavated a skull fossil that provides evidence of a newly discovered species of big cat. So in other words, they found the 6 million year old skull of a giant cat like a tiger or a lion. Based on this evidence, scientists hypothesized that big cats branched off from smaller wild cats about 6 million years ago. So once they found this big skull of this new species of big cat, they were like, okay, this is about 6 million years old. This must be when big cats branched off from smaller cats. So there was one type of cat. Imagine just one type of cat that's maybe medium sized, and they're spread out all over the place, and the medium cats over here got larger and turned into big cats, and the medium cats over here got smaller and turned into small cats. Now, they think that that happened 6 million years ago. So which of the things do you think that they would have used? Which evidence do you think they would have used to determine that? Do you think that a food web showing feeding relationships would help? Do you think a population and migration data for small cats would help? Do you think the fossil record, by comparing DNA between big cats and small cats, would help? Or the historical record of interactions between different species of big cats? So basically, which of these four things do you think would be the best thing to do to find out if that is true, that 6 million years ago, big cats and small cats kind of went their separate ways?
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Is it already that late?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one indivisible. Please take a seat for a moment of silence.
I didn't realize it was that late. All right, moment's over. I gotta keep going. The fossil record and DNA comparisons of big cats and small cats, that is it. Okay, so by looking at the fossil record, that's how you can tell how long ago species branched off from each other. So look at this. This is an example of gorillas and chimpanzees, and these are all of the predecessors that led up to people. Okay, so if we look at all the skulls, you can see that about this time here, this is when.
Thank you, and it's a great day to be alive.
Thanks. At this point here, this is when all of these pre-human ancestors branched off from the gorillas and apes, was about right here. Okay, so the fossil record is my point. That's what it is. Okay, so this is the homologous structure photo I showed you earlier. These limbs provide evidence of common ancestry because they, what is it? Because they have the same basic structure, because they perform the same function, are the same size, or are parts of mammals? Are all these the same size? Is a whale flipper the same size as a cat arm? No, of course not. The same size as a bird wing? This is not to scale. A bird wing is not the same size as a horse leg, okay? So they're not the same size, so we can get rid of H. Do they all perform the same function? Well, whale flippers swim, horse legs run, birds fly. They don't all perform the same function, do they? So we can get rid of G. So is it because they have the same basic structure? or because they're all parts of mammals. Are all of these things mammals? A lot of these are, but there's one there's one that's not a mammal, and that's birds. Birds are not mammals, okay? So they're not all mammals, so it can't be J, so it has to be F. They have the same basic structure. I know it may not look like it, but it's all the same bones in all the same places. They're just different lengths. All right. So we have these three diagrams, 1, 2, and 3. These are three different arms of three different species. Which structures in figures 2 and 3, which are these two over here, are homologous, or in other words, similar or the same to C in figure 1? So here's bone C in figure 1. Which one of these is homologous in 2 and 3 to bone C? So bone C is a small bone on the bottom underneath another bone that's attached to this big bone here. So here's this big bone, and then there's a smaller bone on top and a smaller bone underneath. Here's a big bone, and then a smaller bone on top and a smaller bone underneath. So the smaller bone underneath is the same as V in number 2 and O in number 3. So that is B. All right, which of the following structure pairs provides the best evidence of a common ancestor based on anatomical similarities? Okay, so which two of these do you think, because of how similar they are, indicate that they have a common ancestor? Is it bee wings and bird wings? Legs on a beetle and legs on a cat? Whale flipper and a bat wing? Or human eyebrows and ant antennas? Which two can we get rid of and say that they are not homologous and probably don't have a common ancestor? We can get rid of B, legs on a beetle and legs on a cat. Nothing alike, not similar in any way. What's another one? We can't get rid of C. A, bee wings and bird wings. So bird wings have bones and they're covered in feathers. Bee wings don't have any bones. There's no bones in a bee wing. So it's just like a flap of modified skin. Okay. So it's not A. We can get rid of A. We can get rid of B. Between C and D, which one makes more sense that it's true? I don't think human eyebrows and ant antennas are anything alike. They don't do the same function. They're not the same structure. They don't do the same function. They don't even look the same. So it must be C, right? Okay, which two of these, out of 1, 2, and 3, which two do you think are homologous and share a common ancestor? Which two most likely have a recent common ancestor? 1 and 3, correct. 1 and 3, yep. We got the bat wing and we got the human arm again. Same bones in the same places, they're just different sizes. How can evolutionary relationships among organisms be determined by comparing embryonic development? This is the last one. So did you guys know that when embryos develop, you know what an embryo is, first of all? An embryo is like what a baby is before it's a fetus, before it has all the parts. It's called an embryo. It's like in the very early stages of development, soon after the sperm and egg combine. Now, our embryos, when we're embryos, we look a whole lot like a lot of other embryos from a lot of different animals. Like we look a lot like ape embryos, but we also look like fish embryos. We also look like frog embryos. A lot of embryos look very similar. And that indicates that early on in development, the same things are happening. Why? Because we all have common DNA. Why? Because we all come from the same place. Why? Because we all have common ancestry somewhere down the line, as if you go back far enough, we're all related somehow. So, which one of these answer choices sounds like it is correct? No, you're just guessing. The more similar the embryos looked, the more likely they have recent common ancestry. So I'll let you guys tell me what that is. A, B, C, D. You tell me. You tell me. I know you're on. I'm going to let you tell me.